Okay, I want to tell a little story. It's about ticks. I've been camping for the last 3 days in eastern central Oregon, approximately. Now, I hadn't seen anybody for about 2 days, and I can't remember the highway I was on, but it was like 115 or something, heading south, totally in the middle of nowhere in the Malheur National Forest. And I knew I was getting close to Burns, and I turned off this road that I was on, up a dirt road to the top of this mountain where I could see some radio towers, cell phone towers. You know, it was like the highest point outside of Burns. And it was, once I got to the top, it was completely, it looked like a post-apocalyptic scene where there's all these old buildings that had been demolished and destroyed, and all that was left were some of the pylons and footings, and it looked really cool. I got a video of it. Anyway, this is my tick story. So I'm exploring the area, looking at all these abandoned buildings and going through some brush. Now, I've had no problems with ticks up to this point. Like, I've been in the bush in other areas north of Malheur. But this particular moment, I brushed by a couple bushes. They were pretty sparse. It wasn't like it was crowded or anything like that. And I must have picked up some ticks, but I didn't know it. So after hiking around a little bit, I got back in the truck and I drove down the hill into Burns and stopped at the first gas station I saw to get some chips and a drink. Got back in my truck, filled the tank, got back in my truck, and drove to a little park and had some lunch. So I'm sitting there eating my chips, drinking my drink, and I feel something crawling up my cheek. And I look in the mirror, the rearview mirror, and there's a tick climbing up my cheek, right up near my nose and my eye. And I grabbed it real quick and I threw it out the window. And I sat there for a minute. I'm like, holy shit. I looked at my body to see if I could see any more. And I didn't see any more, so I just sat there. But I kept thinking about it. I'm like, God, there could be more on me. So I get out of the truck and I take off my sweater. It's cold out. And so I take off my sweater and I see another one on the outside of my sweater. So I grab it and throw it. And then I turn my sweater inside out to see if there's any on the inside. And sure enough, there were about 3 more. So I flicked them all off. And I'm like, oh my God, now I'm like super paranoid. They're all over me, right? So I take off my shirt. Now I'm like downtown, like Burns, and like in a park where there's people around. And they must have thought I was crazy. I was taking off my shirt, looking at my arms, trying to look in the side view mirror at my back as I'm shirtless, and I'm looking at my pants. I didn't see any more, but I'm still paranoid, like they're in my pants or underneath or something. So I'm like lifting up my pants to see if I can see any more. Nothing. And I'm like, okay, well maybe I'm in the green. So I didn't finish my lunch, and I wound up going to a Dairy Queen because it was right there. I pulled into the Dairy Queen. I'm sitting there waiting for my burger. And I'm like, I'm just going to check myself again. And sure enough, there was another one on my leg, and he was embedding himself. Like, they're disgusting. They, like, cut through the flesh, and then they stick these suckers in, and they start gorging on your blood. It's really gross, right? I don't want that on my body. So I grabbed the little fucker and I flicked him outside the window, like right at the at the um, at the window as I'm waiting for my food. Anyway, so now I'm super paranoid, and I pull out after I get my food, and I'm driving down the highway, and I'm like, I've got to find a spot outside of town where I can strip down naked and just check my whole body, right? So I'm driving for about 20 minutes, thinking these things are crawling all over me, right? And I finally find a turnoff. I'm driving down this dirt road. It's open land, right? So I kind of get down into this little valley area on somebody's property. It said no trespassing, but I had to I had to check myself out. So I'm standing in the middle of nowhere in the desert, and I'm pulling off all my clothes, checking on the inside, turning everything inside out, pulled my pants off. I'm standing in the dirt with my socks off. I'm totally butt naked, right? Totally butt naked. I don't see any. There's none. I don't see any on my clothes after I turned them all inside out. I'm feeling better that I got them all, which I counted about 6. Totally disgusting. And they're big guys, too. They were probably about the size of half my pinky nail. I don't know how to describe it, maybe 4 centimeters, like a quarter of an inch round. They're big. Anyway, so I'm like, okay, well, this is a good opportunity to change my clothes because I've been in the same clothes for 2 days. And put new socks on, new underwear, new pants. I'm feeling clean. And I get back in the truck. I'm like, okay, I feel good, right? I rolled down my window and I look to my left, and there's a giant bull with horns, like sharp horns, just staring at me. He's looking right at me, and he's probably about, I'd say, 20 yards away from me, close enough to where I could see his eyes, and he's just staring, like don't fuck with me stare. Like, if you make the wrong move, I'm going to charge you stare. Or he could have been just thinking, what the fuck is this strange-ass human being doing standing in the middle of the desert in my territory, butt naked? And I laughed, and I'm like, sorry, buddy. A whole bunch of his herring, or whatever they call it, his flock, all of his women were standing behind, minding their own business. But this big black bull is just staring at me. And as I'm leaving, I'm like, oh my God, that's the funniest thing that's happened to me in a long time. And it kind of scared me for a second. Like, oh my God, that guy could have just charged me when I didn't even know. I didn't even know he was standing there looking at me because I was concerned about all the ticks on my body. And I'm stripping down, looking through everything frantic, throwing shit around, looking in the car, looking on the seat of my car, everywhere. And this bull is just staring at me the whole time. Anyway, that's my tick story.